Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Socialism and Anarchism, written on November 24, 1905, published in Novaya Zhizn, number 21, November 25, 1905. Signed, N. Lenin. Published according to the newspaper text. Source: Lenin Collected Works, Progress Publishers, 1965, Moscow, Volume 10, pages 71 to 74. Translated, Andrew Rothstein. Transcription / markup, art symbol of public domain, Lenin Internet Archive. You may freely copy, distribute, display and perform this work, as well as make derivative and commercial works. Please credit Marxist's Internet Archive as your source. The Executive Committee of the Soviet of Workers' Deputies decided yesterday, November 23, to reject the application of the anarchists for representation on the Executive Committee and on the Soviet of Workers' Deputies. The Executive Committee itself has given the following reasons for this decision. 1. In the whole of international practice, Congresses and socialist conferences have never included representatives of the anarchists, since they do not recognize the political struggle as a means for the achievement of their ideals. 2. Only parties can be represented, and the anarchists are not a party. We consider the decision of the Executive Committee to be in the highest degree correct, and of enormous importance from the point of view both of principle and of practical politics. If we were to regard the Soviet of Workers' Deputies as a workers' parliament or as an organ of proletarian self-government, then of course it would have been wrong to reject the application of the anarchists. However insignificant, fortunately, the influence of the anarchists among our workers may be, nevertheless, a certain number of workers undoubtedly support them. The question whether the anarchists constitute a party, an organization, a group, or a voluntary association of like-minded people, is a formal question, and not of major importance in terms of principle. Lastly, if the anarchists, while rejecting the political struggle, apply for representation in an institution which is conducting such a struggle, this crying inconsistency merely goes to show once again how utterly unstable are the philosophy and tactics of the anarchists. But, of course, instability is no reason for excluding anyone from a parliament, or an organ of self-government. We regard the decision of the Executive Committee as absolutely correct and in no way contradicting the functions, the character and the composition of this body. The Soviet of Workers' Deputies is not a labor parliament and not an organ of proletarian self-government, nor an organ of self-government at all, but a fighting organization for the achievement of definite aims. This fighting organization includes, on the basis of a temporary, unwritten fighting agreement, representatives of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, the Party of Proletarian Socialism, of the Socialist Revolutionary Party, the representatives of petty bourgeois socialism, or the extreme left wing of revolutionary bourgeois Democrats, and finally many non-party workers. The latter, however, are not non-party in general, but are non-party revolutionaries, their sympathies being entirely on the side of the revolution, for the victory of which they are fighting with boundless enthusiasm, energy and self-sacrifice. For that reason it will be quite natural to include representatives of the revolutionary peasantry in the Executive Committee. For all practical purposes, the Soviet of Workers' Deputies is an inchoate, broad-fighting alliance of socialists and revolutionary Democrats. The term non-party revolutionary, of course, representing a series of transitional stages between the former and the latter. Such an alliance is obviously necessary for the purpose of conducting political strikes and other, more active forms of struggle, for the urgent democratic demands which have been accepted and approved by the overwhelming majority of the population. In an alliance of this sort, the anarchists will not be an asset, but a liability. They will merely bring disorganization and thus weaken the force of the joint assault. To them it is still debatable whether political reform is urgent and important. The exclusion of anarchists from the fighting alliance which is carrying out, as it were, our democratic revolution, is quite necessary from the point of view of this revolution and is in its interests. There can be a place in a fighting alliance only for those who fight for the aim of that alliance. If, for example, the cadets, or the party of law and order had managed to recruit at least several hundred workers into their St. Petersburg branches, the Executive Committee of the Soviet of Workers' Deputies would hardly have opened its doors to the representatives of such organizations. In explaining its decision, the Executive Committee refers to the practice of international socialist congresses. We warmly welcome this statement, this recognition by the executive body of the St. Petersburg Soviet of Workers' Deputies of the ideological leadership of the international social democratic movement. The Russian Revolution has already acquired international significance. The enemies of the revolution in Russia are already conspiring with Wilhelm II and with all sorts of reactionaries, tyrants, militarists and exploiters in Europe against free Russia. Neither shall we forget that the complete victory of our revolution demands an alliance of the revolutionary proletariat of Russia with the socialist workers of all countries. It is not for nothing that international socialist congresses adopted the decision not to admit the anarchists. A wide gulf separates socialism from anarchism, and it is in vain that the agents provocateurs of the secret police and the newspaper lackeys of reactionary governments pretend that this gulf does not exist. The philosophy of the anarchists is bourgeois philosophy turned inside out. Their individualistic theories and their individualistic ideal are the very opposite of socialism. Their views express, not the future of bourgeois society, which is striding with irresistible force towards the socialization of labor, but the present and even the past of that society, the domination of blind chance over the scattered and isolated small producer. Their tactics, which amount to a repudiation of the political struggle, disunite the proletarians and convert them in fact into passive participators in one bourgeois policy or another, since it is impossible and unrealizable for the workers really to dissociate themselves from politics. In the present Russian Revolution, the task of rallying the forces of the proletariat, of organizing it, of politically educating and training the working class, is more imperative than ever. The more outrageous the conduct of the Black Hundred government, the more zealously its agents provocateurs strive to fan base passions among the ignorant masses, and the more desperately the defenders of the autocracy, which is rotting alive, clutch at every opportunity to discredit the revolution by organizing hold-ups, pogroms and assassinations, and by fuddling lumpen proletarians with drink. The more important is the task of organization that falls primarily to the party of the socialist proletariat. And we shall therefore resort to every means of ideological struggle to keep the influence of the anarchists over the Russian workers just as negligible as it has been so far. Notes the Party of Law and Order, a counter-revolutionary organization of the big commercial and industrial bourgeoisie, the landlords in the top ranks of the bureaucracy, founded in the autumn of 1905. It fully supported the Tsarist regime, and welcomed the dissolution of the First Duma. During the elections to the Second Duma it formed a bloc with the Black Hundred Union of True Russians. It fell apart in 1907. Backwards Forwards Works Index Volume 10